The rhythm of my days had become almost mechanical. I woke up before the sun, moved through the house like a ghost, packed my bag with everything I needed for the day, and drove the familiar route to the office in silence. My husband and I had reached a place in our marriage that was more about habit than intimacy, more about partnership than passion. We were functional, respectful, predictable. Nothing was wrong exactly, but nothing was truly alive either. My office was an extension of that structure, neat, efficient, with everything in its place. I ran my architectural firm with quiet authority. I didn't like surprises, didn't have time for chaos. I had learned over the years how to keep everything balanced: projects, clients, employees, emotions. There was a sense of safety in knowing what came next, in having control over my environment. That control gave me purpose, even when other parts of my life felt like they were fading. When the workload grew beyond what I could manage on my own, my business partner suggested I bring in an assistant. At first, I resisted. I didn't like the idea of someone hovering near, learning my routines, sharing my space. But after one too many late nights alone at the office, I relented. She arrived on a Tuesday morning. Her name was Ellie. She walked in quietly, with a folder in her hands and a calm presence that didn't disrupt the energy of the room. She looked professional, but not stiff, confident, but not arrogant. There was something composed about her, a kind of quiet precision that immediately put me at ease. She listened carefully, asked the right questions, and got to work without fuss. In the beginning, I noticed only what was necessary: her punctuality, the way she organized my calendar without being intrusive, how she remembered tiny details about meetings or clients without needing reminders. She moved through the office with an ease that made her almost invisible, and yet I found myself depending on her more quickly than I expected. She became part of the routine, seamlessly absorbed into the fabric of my day. It was only after a few weeks that I began to notice other things. The way she stood just a little too straight when she was focused. The way her hands moved when she typed, quick, efficient, precise. The shape of her mouth when she concentrated. I told myself it was just admiration, appreciation for competence in a world where it was rare. But something about her unsettled the quietness in me. I would find her waiting by my office door in the morning, a coffee in each hand, knowing how I liked mine. I never asked her to do that. I never told her I noticed. But I did. Every time I took the cup from her, there was a flicker in her eyes, a softness that was hard to name. And every time, something inside me responded, quietly, involuntarily. She never overstepped, never lingered too long. But her presence became a constant, subtle hum beneath everything else. I caught myself watching her sometimes when she didn't know, when she leaned over a table to straighten blueprints, when she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, when she laughed softly with one of the interns. None of it meant anything, but it was there. I tried not to think about it. I buried myself deeper into work. I reminded myself that I was married, that I was settled, that this wasn't something I had space for. But the truth was, Ellie had disrupted something in me, not with words, not even with actions, just by being there, by existing in the edges of my life with a kind of quiet gravity that pulled at parts of me I thought I had long buried. There was nothing to name yet, nothing to define, but the shift had begun. And though I didn't understand it, I felt it, like the first gust of wind before a storm, soft, almost imperceptible, but impossible to ignore. It happened gradually, like the way dusk settles over a room, soft, unnoticed at first, until suddenly everything is drenched in a different shade. Ellie had become a fixture in my daily life, and yet something in the way I observed her had changed. I began to notice her not just as an assistant, but as a presence that lingered even when she left the room. She never demanded attention, but my awareness of her grew sharper. The subtle scent she left behind when she walked past me, the low tone of her voice when she read out my schedule, the graceful way she moved between tasks. None of it was overt, none of it was meant to entice, but it did. There were moments that hovered on the edge of ordinary but felt weighted. The way her fingers brushed mine when handing over a file, the way her gaze would catch mine in passing, steady, unreadable, then quickly averted. Sometimes, when we worked late, the room would fall into a shared silence that wasn't empty. It vibrated with something unspoken, something I didn't yet dare to examine. I began to look forward to those silences, to her presence in the corner of my eye. When she sat across from me in meetings, I found myself watching her mouth as she took notes, the way her lips pressed together in thought. I memorized the way she tucked her leg under her chair, the slope of her neck when she leaned over a document. I told myself it was nothing, that I was simply tired, overworked, needing a distraction. But even that excuse felt hollow. I started dressing more carefully, choosing earrings I hadn't worn in years, spritzing perfume I usually saved for special occasions. I didn't admit to myself why. I just wanted to feel more seen. And she did see me, not in the polite, professional way others did, but with a quiet attentiveness that left me feeling exposed and oddly alive. One afternoon, we stood side by side at the drafting table, going over plans. Our arms touched, bare skin to bare skin, and neither of us moved away. It was the lightest contact, but it seared into my memory. Later, I sat alone in my office, my arm still tingling from where hers had grazed it. I couldn't focus. I couldn't escape the pulse that had started beating louder beneath everything I thought I knew about myself. In meetings, I found myself losing track of conversations. My eyes drifted to where she sat, absorbed in her laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration. I memorized that look. I craved it. I wanted to touch her without meaning to reach out and smooth the line between her eyebrows. I kept my hands to myself, but my thoughts wandered. She would leave small notes on my desk sometimes, reminders, calendar changes, details of clients. I began saving them. Her handwriting was neat, slanted, distinct. I traced the loops of her letters with my eyes, imagining the movement of her hand as she wrote them. I told myself it was foolish, that I was imagining intimacy where there was none, but something in me didn't care. I started waking up thinking about her, wondering what she would wear, hoping she'd linger longer near my desk. At night, I lay in bed next to my husband and stared at the ceiling, feeling the space between us grow wider. I would close my eyes and see Ellie instead, her silhouette in the office light, the curve of her spine beneath a fitted blouse, the way she smiled with only one corner of her mouth when she was amused. The shift between us remained unspoken, but it thickened with each day. A glance held too long, a pause before saying goodbye, the warmth of her shoulder when we stood too close. None of it could be explained or excused away anymore. There was a tension coiled in the air whenever we were alone, subtle and intoxicating. It wrapped around me like a question I didn't know how to answer. I convinced myself I was still in control, that nothing had happened, that it was just a harmless fascination. But deep down, beneath the carefully constructed routines and the steady surface of my life, something had cracked open, and through that crack, she kept slipping in, quietly, completely, without permission, and I wasn't trying to stop her. It was late, the kind of late where the world outside feels hollowed out, and the only light is artificial, casting long, quiet shadows across familiar surfaces. We had stayed after everyone else had left, finishing a proposal that could have easily waited until morning, but neither of us said so. We both lingered under the soft hum of the desk lamps, working side by side, neither in a rush to return to wherever the rest of our lives waited. The silence had deepened between us, no longer neutral, but electric, alive with a tension that neither of us acknowledged aloud, but both carried in our skin. I stood near the window, half focused on the city lights in the distance. I felt her presence before I heard her steps. She came up beside me and didn't speak, just stood close enough that I could sense the heat rising from her skin. My breath shifted, shallower now, more aware of every inch of air between us. When her fingers brushed the side of my hand, it was the lightest contact imaginable, but it felt like a line had been crossed, one I had drawn and redrawn 100 times in my mind, only for it to disappear in an instant. Her fingers laced gently through mine, not demanding, but certain, as though they had always belonged there. I turned slightly, drawn to her without thought. Her eyes met mine, dark and steady, and then she moved. The moment her mouth touched mine, something inside me splintered, quietly, violently, completely. Her lips were warm, soft, deliberate, not hesitant. She kissed like someone who had been holding back for a long time. Her mouth pressed into mine with growing insistence, a slow unfolding that made the rest of the world dissolve. Her hands moved with equal precision. They slid up my arms, tracing the fabric of my blouse, pausing just briefly before her fingers slipped beneath the hem. My breath caught. Her skin was cool at first, her touch light, exploratory. She didn't rush. She let her hands speak, and they spoke with reverence. She grazed the sides of my waist, the curve of my lower back, learning the map of me with gentle insistence. Her tongue parted my lips with a kind of quiet hunger, a slow, sensuous glide that left me aching. She kissed with intent, with knowledge, her tongue sweeping slowly against mine, drawing out every reaction, every tremor. My body moved without thought, leaning into her, seeking more. She kissed like she was discovering a secret, like she needed to learn it by taste, by texture, by every warm exhale that passed between us. We shifted, her hands guiding me backward until my legs touched the edge of the couch. She eased me down slowly, her body following mine, a slow descent into something inevitable. Her mouth never left me. It traveled from my lips to the edge of my jaw, down the column of my neck, each kiss slower than the last, each one sinking deeper beneath my skin. I felt her fingers working at the buttons of my blouse, not with impatience, but with focus. One by one, each undone with care. When the fabric parted and my skin was bare beneath her touch, I shivered, not from cold, but from the intensity of being seen. Her mouth closed around my breast with a tenderness that made my breath stutter. She kissed and licked softly, her tongue circling my nipple, slow and unhurried. My hand found her hair, threading through it as she moved, anchoring myself to the warmth of her mouth. She moaned against my skin, a soft, vibrating sound that shot straight through me. Her tongue flicked, swirled, teased, until I arched into her, my body aching for more. And she gave it, gradually, deliberately, never overwhelming, always reading me with her mouth, her hands, her breath. She moved lower, tracing a line with her tongue down my stomach, pausing at the edge of my waistband. I felt her fingers hook into the fabric, peeling it away, bearing me inch by inch. When her mouth found me there, I gasped, my hands clutching the cushions, my hips rising involuntarily. Her tongue was velvet and fire, soft licks at first, slow and shallow, then deeper, firmer, matching the rhythm of my body as it opened to her. Her fingers slid under my thighs, holding me gently but with purpose, grounding me as I trembled beneath her. She explored me with a patience that bordered on devotion. Her tongue moved in slow, knowing circles, sometimes flattening, sometimes flicking, drawing out sounds from me I didn't know I could make. My breath came in short bursts, my thighs tensing, my hands lost in her hair. She didn't let up. She worked me open, her mouth steady, her tongue coaxing me toward the edge with unbearable precision. And when I came, it was like something shattered and poured out of me, leaving me weightless and full at the same time. She didn't move right away. She stayed between my legs, her cheek pressed against my thigh, her hand stroking my sides as I came down. When she finally climbed back up to me, I pulled her into my arms without thinking. Her skin was warm, her breath shallow. I could taste myself on her lips when she kissed me again, and instead of shame, I felt a kind of fierce tenderness that frightened me more than anything. I held her as my body slowly calmed, as the storm inside me gave way to stillness. I had never been touched like that before, not just with skill, but with attention, with care, with unspoken understanding. Her fingers had said things I had never dared admit. Her tongue had read the places I kept locked away. And now they were open. Now she was inside them. There were no words. None were needed. My body remembered hers. Her breath was a rhythm against my chest. We lay together in that half-dark room, tangled in something that had once been boundaries, but was now only skin. I stared at the ceiling, dazed, spent, changed. I had crossed a line I could no longer see behind me, and I didn't want to go back. The morning unfolded slowly, like warm honey slipping down glass. The office was quiet, and I arrived earlier than usual, needing space to think, to breathe, to feel myself again. My body still carried the imprint of the night before, a softness in my limbs, a looseness in my breath. I couldn't stop replaying it, the way her mouth had moved over me, the patience in her hands, the intensity that had lived in the silence between our skin. Everything felt heavier and lighter all at once. I walked through the halls, my heels echoing softly, and settled into the quiet stillness of my office. But I couldn't focus. My hands moved through routine, turning on the lamp, arranging papers, opening my laptop, but my mind was elsewhere. Her face kept returning to me. The shadow of her lashes when she looked up, the way her fingers spread across my waist, the sound she made when she pressed her mouth against my skin. It was all too present. By mid-morning, I made an excuse to leave. No meeting scheduled, no emergencies. I needed solitude, not for avoidance, but to be alone with what I was feeling. My car ride home passed in a blur. The familiar streets, the turns I'd made 1,000 times, all of it faded behind the noise of my thoughts. At home, I went straight to the bathroom. I turned on the taps and let the water run until steam curled up the mirror. I undressed slowly, slipping each piece of clothing off as though peeling away layers of control, of restraint. I stepped into the tub and sank beneath the water, letting it envelop me completely. My body floated just under the surface, warm and weightless. For a moment, I closed my eyes and just breathed. The heat softened me, my muscles loosened, my breath slowed, and beneath my closed lids she appeared again. Ellie. The shape of her shoulders, the firmness of her thighs pressing into mine, the way her tongue had moved against me, drawing me apart piece by piece. My hand slid over my stomach, trailing lower, and I didn't resist the impulse. I let it happen the way I had long denied myself. My fingers moved gently at first, gliding between my legs with slow, exploring circles. I imagined her mouth there again, the heat of it, the way she had known exactly how to touch me without asking. My breath quickened, my back arched slightly beneath the water. I moaned, soft and low, and the sound echoed in the tiled room like a confession. I circled harder, faster, chasing the rhythm her memory created. I thought of the way her hair brushed my skin as she kissed down my chest, how her breath had hitched when I cried out. My free hand gripped the edge of the tub, anchoring me as I let the sensations wash through me, cresting and pulling me under. When the release came, it was sharp and sudden, rippling through me like a shudder of heat and clarity. I gasped, my legs trembling under the water, my body sinking deeper into stillness. I stayed there long after, floating in the warm silence, my skin flushed, my breath slow. I traced the tips of my fingers over the tops of my thighs, the curve of my hip, my breast, not out of desire anymore, but remembrance. She had touched me like this. She had made me feel seen, wanted, real. And now, alone in the bath, I let the echo of her linger in me. When I finally rose, the water clung to my skin like a second breath. I wrapped myself in a towel and stood before the mirror. My hair was damp, my face flushed, my lips slightly parted. I looked different, softer somehow, but stronger too. Something inside me had shifted, not just from what we had done, but from what it had awakened. As I stepped into the quiet of the bedroom, I realized I wasn't afraid of what I felt, not anymore. The world outside might remain the same, but I had changed. I had tasted something I couldn't forget, and it lived now beneath my skin, steady and sure, like a new breath I was just learning how to take. The days that followed unfolded with a strange quietness, not empty, but full of something that pulsed just beneath the surface. Everything looked the same, my house, my office, my routines, but I moved through it differently now. There was a looseness in my shoulders, a softness in my gaze, a kind of awareness that hummed in my body, even when I tried to focus on ordinary things. I carried her with me, not in the obvious ways, but in the way a room remembers warmth after the fire is gone. At home, my husband noticed my distraction. He asked gentle questions at first, then stopped asking altogether. We had become masters of silence over the years, filling the space between us with schedules and dinner and shared shows we barely watched. There had been no great betrayal, no cruel words or slammed doors, just time and the slow erosion of presence. I used to think it was enough, that marriage didn't have to be passion, just partnership, but now I knew better. Every time I saw Ellie at the office, my breath caught in a way I tried not to show. She remained poised, professional, but her eyes lingered a little longer than they used to. Our conversations stayed surface level, our movements restrained, but there was something unmistakable living in the pauses, in the moments between words. I started inventing reasons to see her more often, to call her into my office, to ask her opinion on things I already knew the answers to, not because I needed her insight, but because I craved the sound of her voice. Her presence was a balm and an ache all at once. I began to dismantle parts of myself without realizing it. Little rebellions. I stopped wearing my wedding ring at home. I started sleeping in the guest room more often, blaming stress, headaches, work. But the truth was, I couldn't lie next to someone who didn't see me anymore, not when I had felt what it was like to be truly seen. I started turning down social events with other couples, no longer able to endure the performance of happiness. The more I pulled away, the clearer everything became. My marriage was a structure I had outgrown, a shelter that no longer fit. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. My face carried the years, lines at the corners of my eyes, softness in my jaw, but it was not tired. It was alive. There was color in my cheeks again, a brightness behind my eyes I hadn't seen in so long. I wasn't running away from something. I was stepping toward it. I stopped making excuses. I stopped apologizing to myself. What had happened with Ellie wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was clarity, a kind of homecoming. My desire wasn't shameful. It was a signal, a reminder that I was still capable of feeling deeply, of being moved, of wanting more than just habit. For too long, I had let the shape of my life be determined by what was expected of me. Now I wanted something else. I didn't know what it would look like. I only knew it had to begin with honesty. I started to change things, quietly. I reduced my hours at the firm, letting go of the need to be in control of everything. I took long walks alone, let myself sit in silence without distraction. I read books I had once hidden from view, stories about women who dared to want what they wanted. I filled notebooks with thoughts I had never voiced. And through it all, I thought of her. There was a day I stood outside the door to her office, my hand resting on the frame, unsure whether to knock. She was inside, laughing with someone, and the sound reached me like music. I didn't go in. I just stood there, listening, letting myself feel how much I wanted her. Not just her body, but her presence, her fire, her quiet strength. I knew then that wanting her wasn't just about need. It was about recognition. She had reminded me of who I was beneath the roles I played. I was no longer trying to keep things contained. I had stopped drawing the line between right and wrong based on fear. I had lived too long within a structure that taught me to minimize myself. Now I was learning to stretch, to breathe, to move through the world in a way that honored the parts of me I had kept hidden for too long. The longing I felt wasn't dangerous. It was a beginning, and I was finally ready to walk into it with both eyes open. It happened without ceremony, without a grand declaration or dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet evening, the kind that unfolds slowly, without expectation. I was home, standing by the kitchen sink, the hum of the dishwasher in the background, my fingers wet and pruned from rinsing dishes I didn't care about. The house was silent except for that hum. I looked around at the life I had built, the one I had carefully tended for decades. The framed photographs, the matching furniture, the stack of unopened mail on the counter. Everything in its place, everything still. I realized then that I no longer lived in this space, not really. I occupied it. I passed through it like a shadow. That night, I packed a small bag, not out of impulse, but with a kind of calm finality. I didn't take much, just what I needed, just what belonged to me. The decision had already been made long before, somewhere deep inside, in the space where truth finally outruns fear. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing to explain that hadn't already faded between the lines of silence we had been living in for years. I simply walked out. I didn't go to her immediately. I drove aimlessly at first, letting the streetlights flicker over the windshield like falling stars. I needed a moment outside of structure, outside of everything expected of me. I pulled over in a quiet neighborhood, cut the engine, and sat in the dark. The car was still warm, and I wrapped my arms around myself, pressing my palms against the place where my heart beat. It was steady, certain. I thought about all the years I had spent waiting for clarity, for permission, for a sign that it was okay to want more. And now, in the quiet, I knew the only permission I needed had already been given by the way she had looked at me that night, by the way her body had folded into mine like we belonged to something outside of time. Eventually, I drove to her place. I didn't text or call. I just walked up to the door and knocked. my fingers trembling slightly, but my mind clear. When she opened the door, her eyes met mine, and whatever question she had faded before it formed. She stepped back without a word, and I stepped inside. The door clicked closed behind me, not like an ending, but like a seal. The moment stretched, quiet but charged. She took my bag from me and set it aside. Then she reached for me, not with urgency, but with a kind of gentle inevitability. Her arms wrapped around my waist, her forehead rested against mine, and we stood there, breathing each other in. No apologies, no explanations, just presence, just truth. Later, in the quiet of her bedroom, under the weight of soft sheets and softer hands, I let myself unravel again. Her mouth found mine slowly, reverently, like we were returning to a place we had only begun to explore. Our bodies moved with a familiarity that went beyond the physical. She touched me with intention, as if every inch of my skin held something sacred. I responded without hesitation, without doubt. Her hands on my hips, her breath on my neck, the weight of her body pressed to mine. It was all I needed to feel real again. I cried when I came, not from pain, not from sadness, but from the release of everything I had held in for too long. The years of pretending, the layers of silence, the weight of being that others needed me to be. She held me through it, her arms wrapped tightly around my trembling frame, her lips brushing my temple with a tenderness that made me ache in the best possible way. I felt myself let go in stages, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but breath and heartbeat and the warmth of her skin against mine. We lay tangled together in the dark, our legs woven, her hand resting over my stomach. I watched the ceiling, the slow spin of the fan above us, the shadows shifting with each turn. I thought of all the excuses I had used to keep myself locked away, the shoulds and shouldn'ts, the timelines, the guilt. None of it held weight anymore. It had all melted under the heat of something real. There was no plan for tomorrow, no roadmap, but I didn't need one. I had already stepped across the threshold. I had made a choice, not for her, not for anyone else, for myself, to live honestly, to want without shame, to love without explanation. I turned to her, brushing her hair back, studying the lines of her face in the dark. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at me, not with question, not with fear, but with recognition. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. There, in that quiet space where everything had changed and nothing needed to be named, I finally understood what it meant to belong to my own life. The justifications, the rationalizations, the self-denial, they ended here. In this bed, in her arms, in this breath. I had crossed into something new, and there was no going back.